Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating and honestly slightly terrifying clinical and psychological critique of the modern workplace. We're going deep into the theories of YouTuber Tom Skrylus. He argues that the daily corporate grind isn't just about bad managers or standard burnout. No, we're talking about a deeply ingrained, almost invisible system governing everything we do at work. So let's dive right in and explore what he calls the architecture of control. But before we get into the heavy systemic theories, let me ask you a question that I think most of us can relate to. Why does leaving work exactly on time feel like you're breaking a rule? Seriously, think about it for a second. You feel this tiny, nagging pang of guilt for taking your actual full lunch hour, or for simply closing your laptop at exactly 5 p.m. I mean, where does that self-policing reflex even come from? You aren't violating any contract, yet this internalized alarm bell goes off. Well, it's a psychological glitch that we just accept as totally normal. But according to Skrylus, this is actually the result of intense, lifelong conditioning. So Skrylus defines this environment as the architecture of control. And it's not just about having a boss breathing down your neck. It's a highly sophisticated framework of social engineering. Its whole purpose? To gradually strip away your sovereign identity and reduce you to a searchable metric in a database. The really crucial point here is that we are operating within an invisible architecture that is literally optimized for our exhaustion and our absolute compliance. The system doesn't even need to use obvious force anymore. It just trains you to efficiently police yourself.
Section 1. Childhood Conditioning, the Origins of Obedience.
To really understand how this control mechanism works, we have to look backward. Where does this constant, low-level workplace anxiety actually start? Surprisingly, it traces all the way back to the kindergarten fence. When you look across a human lifespan, there's this clear, undeniable progression of obedience training. It starts in kindergarten, with literal fences and containment, subtly teaching you that your physical desires and your curiosity are secondary to the system's schedule. Then, grade school introduces gold stars and grades, right? It systemizes that compliance. You learn to wait for instructions, ask for permission to use the bathroom, and equate external approval with success. By the time you land in the corporate cubicle, the structure is identical. The gold star just turns into the annual performance review. Ultimately, the modern school curriculum systematically turns obedience into a trackable outcome, rather than fostering any true independence.
Which brings us to this absolute gut punch of a quote. Skrylus states, "If approval still feels like survival to you, school did exactly what it was designed to." That perfectly captures how our childhood conditioning primes us as adults. We are practically trained to treat a corporate performance review as an existential mirror. We end up linking our basic sense of safety and self-worth to an institution's approval. You aren't just doing a job, you're performing the exact obedience you were taught at age 6. And in doing so, you're effectively locking yourself into the system without even realizing it.
Section 2. Newspeak in the cubicle. Corporate linguistics.
Okay, so how do corporations maintain this deep level of control once we're, theoretically free adults? Well, it comes down to carefully engineered language. You might actually be familiar with the term Newspeak from George Orwell's classic dystopian novel 1984. It's defined as the practice of shrinking language to shrink the horizon of thought, which makes dangerous ideas just disappear entirely. Skrylus draws a direct parallel between Orwell's literary concept of newspeak and modern corporate HR communications. By replacing real, harsh words with softer, emptier ones, the underlying reality becomes so much harder to question, analyze, or fight back against.
Think about the sterile corporate terms we hear all the time. Restructuring, right-sizing, or layoff. These words sound gentle, clinical, almost like just rearranging furniture on a spreadsheet, right? But contrast that with the actual human reality. Fired, or loss of livelihood. As Skrylus points out, the harsh truth is that your income stops, your healthcare ends, and your stability vanishes overnight. Corporate linguistics are specifically designed to soften the sting of that extraction. One phrase makes you flinch and get understandably angry, the other just sounds like inevitable corporate weather that you have no choice but to accept.
And because of this linguistic softening, real, authentic dissent is neutralized before it can even finish forming in your head. As you can see, the internalized guard runs before any external intervention has to. You catch yourself policing your own thoughts, filtering your genuine reactions, and performing absolute loyalty to an institution that, let's be honest, views you strictly as a disposable resource. The control mechanism is so elegant that nobody ever needs to yell at you. The culture and the language do all the heavy lifting, ensuring you suppress your own humanity just to fit the corporate shape.
Section 3. The Office Squid Game. Internal Competition.
But it's not just the words we use, though.
The very structure of our day-to-day work is designed to keep us isolated. Skrylus uses this haunting metaphor from the show Squid Game. Imagine a deadly game of tug-of-war where colleagues who used to share resources, joke around, and cooperate are suddenly forced to destroy each other. Why? Because survival, or in the corporate world, hitting a KPI target or a forced curve promotion cycle demands it. It doesn't look like tug-of-war from the inside, of course. It looks like ambition or healthy career progression. But structurally, you are forced to view the colleague you actually respect as an obstacle. Internal competition is heavily weaponized to keep workers divided, exhausted, and solely focused on the game. Skrylus identifies two stark corporate archetypes to explain the human outcomes of this system. First, you've got the successful monster. This person is ruthless, climbs the ladder hyper-efficiently, and treats people merely as instruments to be used and discarded. The system perfectly rewards this programming. Then, you have the failure. By external corporate metrics, this person might be struggling or passed over for promotion, but they retain their humanity, they choose to cooperate, and they help others. The architecture of control rewards the monster and punishes the human, which in Skrylus' view tells you exactly what the system truly values at its core.
Section 4. The Modern Memory Hole. Erased Contributions.
All right, now we hit what is arguably the bleakest endpoint of this whole Orwellian dynamic. What happens when a worker's usefulness runs out and they finally leave the system? In Orwellian terms, the memory hole is the mechanism where inconvenient facts, or even entire individuals, simply cease to exist through quiet bureaucratic procedural removal. Skrylus observes this modern ghost effect in the corporate world. The second your contract ends or you leave the company, your lifelong contributions, your emails, and the trace of your actual physical presence are systematically erased from the historical record. You aren't dramatically destroyed, you are just procedurally cleaned away, as if you were never even there.
The double standard here is literally chilling. Look at the contrast between what Skrylus calls the Pharaoh and worker #107. The Pharaoh, the CEOs and the founders have their legacies immortalized. Their decisions are heavily archived, their names stay in the system, they get Wikipedia pages, and their history is preserved for future generations. But worker #107, the ordinary employee who spent decades actually building the company's daily successes, scrubbed entirely. Under the guise of GDPR compliance or data policy, your existence is anonymized and deleted. You were there, you gave them your time and your energy, but officially, you are erased.
Section 5. Strategic Rebellion, Digital Autonomy.
I know, it's a heavy and somewhat dark realization. But look, the situation isn't hopeless. There is actually a tactical framework for achieving digital autonomy here. The first step in this quiet rebellion is what Skrylus calls the art of noticing. You have to stop the double shift of constantly suppressing your real self to play a corporate character. Start by simply noticing the softening language used around you. Notice that completely unearned guilt's overtaking free time that rightfully belongs to you. Stop automatically performing loyalty for an institution that wouldn't hesitate for a second to replace you. And try a small, practical test. Say no to just one optional, performative meeting. You aren't doing this to be a martyr. You're doing it to prove to yourself that the consequences you've been trained to fear might just be an illusion.
Once you begin to crack that mental programming, you can start building real leverage through the one-man company model. Step 1 is the 1-hour sacrifice. Dedicate just 1 hour a day of intensely focused work to your own pursuits. Step 2 is to build digital assets. This could be content, digital products, or skills that decouple your time from your income, earning money even while you sleep. Step 3 is the ultimate goal. Shift from trading your time for an hourly wage to trading actual value. Doing this consistently over roughly 3 years can transition you from a defensive, reliant mindset to an offensive mindset of true digital autonomy. I want to leave you with this final, incredibly provocative thought from Skrylus. The ultimate victory over the machine is building an identity completely independent of an organization designed to forget you. The absolute most crucial point to take away from all of this is that the cage isn't actually locked. We just keep testing the bars, convinced they're electrified because an institution told us they were when we were 6 years old. So ask yourself, how much of your own identity currently exists outside of a corporate database? It might just be time to start building it. Thanks for joining us for this explainer, and we really hope this sparks some deep curiosity about the hidden systems around you.
So it's like 4:00 p.m. on a Sunday. The sun is just starting to dip down, and suddenly your chest gets just a little bit tight.
Yeah, that classic hollow dread just kind of starts creeping in.
Exactly. And we usually just brush this off.
Mm-hmm.
We tell ourselves it's just because, We hate our alarm clocks.
Right, or we feel this weird pang of guilt, like maybe we just aren't passionate enough about our careers.
Yeah. We totally pathologize that feeling as like an individual psychological quirk or an inherent flaw in our own work ethic. But what if that dread isn't a personal failing at all?
I mean, that's the big question.
Right. What if that Sunday afternoon anxiety is actually an engineered clinical feature of the modern workplace?
Well, it's a huge paradigm shift to think about it that way.
It really is. So welcome to this custom deep dive. Today we are unpacking the underlying framework of the modern office, and we're looking at this through the lens of YouTuber and author Tom Skrylus.
Yeah, we're exploring what he terms the architecture of control.
Exactly. And I gotta say, it is a profoundly unsettling framework to examine.
Oh, absolutely. Mainly because it touches on experiences we just all accept as totally mundane everyday things.
Right, like totally normal life stuff.
Yeah. Skrylus presents this really clinical critique of the hidden dynamics that govern the modern workplace. We're looking at how ordinary, highly capable people are just subtly molded into these complicit, self-policing cogs.
Cogs within a machine that is quite literally optimized for their exhaustion.
Exactly. It's by design.
Right. And we are going to break down the specific mechanisms of this social engineering today. We're pulling from a massive stack of his video transcripts and written frameworks.
Strictly zeroing in on his analysis of corporate social engineering.
Yeah. We'll explore how corporate linguistics shrink your horizon of thought, how the procedural machinery of the office literally erases your life's work the moment you leave.
And why taking a legally permitted sick day triggers this profound sense of moral failing.
Oh man, the sick day guilt is so real. But, to understand the architecture of the modern cubicle, we actually have to step far outside of it first.
Right, you have to go back to the beginning.
Yeah, Skrylus makes the argument that the dread you feel logging onto a corporate server, it didn't start in adulthood.
Not at all.
The blueprint for that anxiety was actually laid down when you were a child. It started literally at the kindergarten fence.
It's such a fascinating historical and psychological through line. I mean, when we think of early education, we generally just picture finger painting, right?
Yeah, socialization, learning the alphabet, snack time.
Exactly. But Skrylus focuses on the primal, somatic experience of entering the school system.
The physical feeling of it.
Yes. Suddenly, as a 5 or 6-year-old child, your physical existence is strictly contained.
Wow. Yeah, when you put it like that.
Right. Your natural biological rhythms, like when to eat, when to move, when to speak, even when to use the restroom.
Oh, yeah. Raising your hand to go to the bathroom.
Exactly. It's all subordinated to an institutional schedule. You form lines to move from point A to point B. You are kept within a literal chain link boundaries.
And it isn't just about the physical containment, is it?
No, not at all.
It's really the initiation into a highly specific psychological conditioning system, like the classic gold star dynamic.
That is the core of it, yeah.
Let's actually dig into the mechanics of that. I mean, why does a shiny piece of foil on a piece of paper hold so much power over a developing brain?
Well, because it fundamentally rewires the brain's reward pathways. This is just basic operant conditioning, straight out of B.F. Skinner's behavioral psychology playbook.
Right. Rats pushing livers for pellets.
Exactly. In a natural environment, a child's dopamine is triggered by play or discovery or, social connection.
Bannock stuff.
Yeah. But the traditional schooling model introduces artificial external metrics to measure inherent worth.
So the grades, the standardized tests, the gold stars.
Right. Children are meticulously trained to equate external, institutional approval with their very survival.
Wow. So they literally feel like they need it to survive.
Yeah, neurologically speaking. When you perform a task exactly as the authority figure prescribed, you get that dopamine hit of approval.
And when you deviate, it's withheld.
Exactly. Over 12 to 16 years, you just neurologically adapt to crave that specific artificial validation loop.
Which introduces the sorting mechanism, right? Skrylus points out that the system aggressively categorizes children based entirely on their compliance to this artificial loop.
Oh, completely.
Like if you quietly memorize the capitals of 50 different countries for a single test information, you will almost certainly forget the next day.
Right, completely useless data in the long run.
Yeah, but if you do it, you are labeled good. You're successful. You're a model student.
But what happens to the child who questions the utility of that memorization?
Right, the one who says, why are we doing this?
They are immediately pathologized. The child who asks why, instead of simply executing the command, is labeled defiant or lazy. or problematic.
Just for asking a logical question.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They aren't failing because they lack intellectual capacity. They are failing because they lack the desired level of compliance.
That is so wild. And the tragedy of this, as Crilius maps out, is what is systematically omitted during this massive compliance exercise.
Right, the stuff they don't teach you.
Yeah. The model student spends thousands of hours mastering rote memorization to earn gold stars, yet the curriculum completely ignores the skills required for actual adult autonomy.
That's the real paradox of modern education. I mean, you can graduate as a high school valedictorian without ever being taught how compound interest works on the massive student loans you literally just signed for.
Always met the truth. It's crazy.
It really is. You are taught absolutely nothing about building assets, managing capital, or, questioning the structures of employment.
You are simply trained to follow a syllabus.
Right. Because the objective of this specific educational lineage, which historically evolved from the Prussian model of industrial schooling, it was never to create autonomous freethinkers.
No, it was designed to produce a compliant workforce for the Industrial Revolution.
Exactly. The system just needs individuals primed for wage labor. It places you into the workforce at the precise age your conditioning is solidified.
Ready to just transfer your dependence on the teacher's gold star over to the manager's performance review.
Yep. And you know what the most insidious part is?
What?
Because of that sorting mechanism we just discussed. If you eventually burn out in the workplace, your conditioning guarantees you will blame yourself.
Oh, wow. Because you're failing the test.
Exactly. You will internalize it as a personal failure of resilience, exactly as you were taught to internalize a bad grade on a spelling test.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second and just push back a bit.
Go for it.
Because this kind of borders on viewing all of human socialization as a trap. Like if we didn't train kids to sit still, regulate their impulses, follow schedules, and respect deadlines, wouldn't society just devolve into absolute chaos?
I mean, it's a fair point.
Right. If we don't have deadlines and obedience, we don't have a functioning power grid, we don't have running water, we don't have civilization, isn't this just the necessary price of a complex society rather than some malicious submission training?
It is a crucial distinction to make. And it's one that requires us to really separate functional cooperation from artificial subordination.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
Well, Scrylis isn't arguing that learning, knowledge, or impulse control are inherently bad. A society absolutely requires shared norms and functional cooperation.
Sure, we need rules.
Right. The danger lies in the totality of the obedience training and how it calcifies into an adult's entire personality structure.
Ah, I see.
Functional cooperation means we agree on rules to achieve a shared goal. Artificial subordination means you defer your own judgment, your own physical needs, and your own moral compass to an authority figure simply because they hold the title of manager.
Oh, that makes total sense.
Mm.
It's the difference between following a traffic light because we all agree it prevents accidents versus like standing at a completely empty intersection at 3 a.m.
Yes.
And you're terrified to cross the street on foot because a red light is shining. The rule has basically superseded reality.
That is the perfect analogy. Exactly. The conditioning is so seamless that adults will fiercely defend their own subjugation.
I rebrand it, right?
Yeah, they rebrand their unquestioning obedience as maturity or professionalism, and they pass this exact framework down to their children, urging them to get the gold star so they can get a good job.
Hoping the system will somehow extract less from the next generation.
Right. And the way this manifests in adult behavior is just striking. Scrylius actually shares a personal anecdote that perfectly encapsulates this.
Oh yeah, I remember this one from the source material. He describes working as a consultant.
Yeah, a grown man with a master's degree.
Right. And it's a Friday afternoon, and his manager casually asks him to stay late to finish a report.
But the critical detail here is that the report isn't actually due until the following Wednesday.
Exactly. There is no crisis.
Right.
There is no client demanding it. It is a completely arbitrary request.
Completely arbitrary. But Scrylis describes his physiological reaction in that exact moment. His heart rate spikes. His stomach drops.
He experiences this immediate visceral panic.
Yeah, the exact same somatic response of a child terrified of disappointing a teacher. He doesn't rationally negotiate the deadline as an equal professional.
He just complies.
Right. He stays late on a Friday, sacrificing his own finite hours of life, simply because he is still measuring his worth by an authority figure's arbitrary approval.
That moment really is the ultimate triumph of the kindergarten conditioning. The physical chain link fences are long gone. but the mental senses are heavily electrified.
Heavily. I mean, think about the mechanics of the modern annual performance review.
Oh, dread. Just pure dread.
Right. For you listening right now, when you last sat down for your review, did you view it objectively?
Probably not.
Did you see it as a rational peer-to-peer business negotiation where you just trade your specialized labor for their capital? Or did your nervous system hijack you?
Did your palms sweat?
Exactly. Did you feel like a 6-year-old waiting for the teacher to hand back a heavily red-inked exam? If your body reacted with fear, that early conditioning is holding you firmly in place.
That physiological reaction is exactly what prevents people from realizing they actually have leverage in that room.
Absolutely.
And this leads us to the next evolution of the control architecture. Because once that childhood conditioning sets the foundation, you graduate and step into the corporate world.
And the mechanisms of control don't just disappear.
No, they become highly sophisticated. The literal fences are replaced by linguistic ones.
Yeah, we are transitioning from physical containment to cognitive containment. And this is achieved almost entirely through corporate language.
Scralius draws heavily on George Orwell's concept of Newspeak here. Now, for the listener, anyone familiar with 1984 knows the basic premise. If a totalitarian regime can systematically eliminate the words for rebellion, they eliminate the conceptual possibility of rebellion itself.
Right. You can't plot a revolution if you literally don't possess the vocabulary to articulate it.
Exactly. But what Scralius argues is that corporate America has deployed a highly evolved, modern iteration of Newspeak.
Specially designed by HR departments and legal teams to shrink your horizon of thought.
And soften the sting of resource extraction.
Yes. It acts as a linguistic filter to prevent authentic human dissent. Let's look at the operational mechanics of this language, starting with the classic example, the shift from the word fired to layoff.
Oh man, the psychological difference between those two words is massive.
Night and day.
When you hear that someone was fired, it elicits a flinch. It feels violent. It implies a direct personal severance, usually associated with, like, fault or conflict.
It's a very sharp word.
It is. But layoff.
Layoff is acoustic phone.
That's a great way to put it.
It sounds gentle, procedural, almost passive. It implies a temporary state of affairs, like a natural occurrence within the macroeconomic business cycle.
Like an unexpected rainstorm. You can't be angry at the rain.
Precisely. Yet the material reality on the ground is totally identical. The moment you are laid off, your income flatlines. Your employer-sponsored healthcare vanishes.
The stability of your family's life is thrown into immediate jeopardy overnight.
Right. But the word fired might make you defensive and angry, whereas layoff conditions you to nod sympathetically and accept it as an unfortunate inevitability.
The language is literally doing the heavy lifting of neutralizing your natural outrage.
And this soft packaging is pervasive. It's everywhere. We don't eliminate jobs to boost shareholder dividends. We execute a restructuring.
Oh, restructuring classic.
Right. We don't fire 10,000 people. We engage in right-sizing or workforce optimization.
Workforce optimization. Wow. When a human being is reduced to a variable that requires optimization, it becomes nearly impossible to mount a moral argument against it.
Exactly. How do you protest against being optimized? The linguistic framing pre-defeats the counter-argument.
I think of it kind of like the surgical drapes used in an operating room.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, the surgeon drapes the patient, leaving only a tiny 2-inch square of skin exposed. Right. They completely cover the person's face, their identity, their humanity.
Okay, yeah.
It allows the surgeon to make a sharp, brutal cut without having to mentally process the fact that they are slicing into a living human being.
That is a very visceral but very accurate analogy.
Right. Corporate Newspeak does the exact same thing for executives and managers. It allows them to execute brutal economic cuts while remaining clinically detached from the human bleeding.
And this detachment culminates in some truly bizarre corporate rituals. Scralius actually recounts an experience that mirrors another Orwellian concept, the 2-minute hate.
Oh, yes. So in Orwell's narrative, the 2-minute hate is a daily ritual where citizens are required to watch propaganda and perform an intense collective emotional reaction to prove their loyalty to the party.
Right. And in the modern office, this ritual is remarkably similar, though the required emotion is typically relentless, toxic positivity rather than rage.
Yeah. Scralius describes sitting in a quarterly all-hands meeting at a manufacturing company. A manager stands at the front of the room, handing out pink donuts to the staff.
Pink donuts, just perfect.
I know, right?
Yeah.
She has this rigidly fixed artificial smile, And she delivers a heavily scripted speech about synergy and family.
Ugh, the corporate family.
Right. She looks at a room full of exhausted people and says, "You all did a tremendous job this year. We're breaking records. We are so proud. But next year, we need you to push even harder."
And we really have to examine the behavioral response of the room in that moment. Like, what did the employees actually do?
They performed the ritual. People nodded enthusiastically. They leaned forward, jotted down meaningless notes on the PowerPoint charts, and asked polite, engaging follow-up questions.
But Scralius notes the underlying reality there. Absolutely no one in that room believed a single word she was saying.
Not one. They all knew the company was the only entity that would see the financial benefits of that record-breaking year.
Yep. Their salaries were going to remain completely flat against inflation.
But they participated in the theater anyway. They ate the donuts and performed the ritual because the culture demanded it.
That is internal policing at its most effective. No one held a gun to their heads, forcing them to nod. The newspeak and the cultural conditioning had successfully merged.
Because to speak up and say, actually, if profits are at record highs, why are our wages stagnant? That would be deemed unprofessional.
Exactly. The language itself outlaws the truth.
But okay, let me challenge the intentionality of this for a second.
Sure.
Is there really a cabal of malicious executives rubbing their hands together in a boardroom, deliberately crafting newspeak to suppress the working class?
It sounds like a movie villain.
Right. Or is this just the natural byproduct of middle management cowardice?
Yeah.
Like, are these just ordinary, flawed people using buzzwords because they are personally too uncomfortable to look an employee in the eye and speak the ugly truth?
It's a very fair question regarding intent, but structurally speaking, it doesn't actually matter.
Why not?
Because whether it is a deliberately engineered conspiracy or simply the organic emergent behavior of thousands of conflict-avoidant managers, the functional output is identical.
Ah, I see.
The language serves to maintain the stability of the system. If a manager uses the word transparency while simultaneously obfuscating the criteria for promotions, they're weaponizing the language, regardless of their conscious intent.
Right. The word restructuring hides the fact that a conscious choice was made by a board of directors to prioritize a quarterly stock buyback over human livelihoods.
Exactly. It turns a deliberate executive choice into a force of nature. And if you are convinced the layoff is a force of nature, you won't fight back.
That makes total sense. The system protects itself regardless of the manager's personal intent. And as this corporate language shrinks your ability to define your reality, the system takes an even more aggressive step.
It does. It goes after your identity.
Yeah, it doesn't just shrink your vocabulary. It is actively designed to shrink your identity. It prepares you from your very first day on the job to be entirely erased the moment you leave.
We are entering the territory of the modern memory hole, which is arguably the most psychologically damaging aspect of this whole architecture.
This part of Scralius's analysis is genuinely haunting. When you step inside the corporate system, your sovereign human identity is immediately stripped away.
Yeah, you are no longer an individual with a history, a family, or a unique perspective. You are reduced to a trackable metric.
Scralius provides a stark example from his time as a consultant. Within the company's vast digital infrastructure, his official identity was literally number 107.
He just became a data point, searchable for efficiency, trackable for optimization, and ultimately deletable.
And he actually tested the boundaries of this dehumanization. He was filling out an internal purchase order for some basic office supplies, and in the optional notes field, he typed a simple sentence.
What did he write?
He just wrote, "This order is for Robert." That was it.
Wow.
Within hours, HR flagged the order. They contacted him and explicitly informed him that putting the first name Robert into the system was a violation of GDPR protocols.
You're kidding.
Nope. The human name was not allowed to exist in the database.
The irony, of course, is that data protection laws like GDPR were ostensibly designed to protect the privacy and dignity of the individual.
Right.
But the corporate architecture weaponizes these regulations. By strictly enforcing the rule that Robert cannot exist in the system, the corporation ensures that only number 107 exists. The human being is structurally irrelevant.
Which maps perfectly onto the concept of the memory hole. In Orwell's regime, the memory hole was a physical incinerator chute.
Right, where they burn documents.
Exactly. If a historical fact became inconvenient to the government, documents were thrown down the chute and burned, literally erasing them from existence. In the modern office, This erasure doesn't require fire.
It just requires an IT protocol.
Exactly. It happens procedurally as a matter of standard offboarding policy.
Consider the mechanics of an employee's departure. The moment a worker's contract is terminated, whether they resign, retire, or are laid off, a meticulously designed sequence is triggered.
A wipe.
Yep. Their email access is instantly severed, their digital login credentials are wiped, their name is scrubbed from the internal directories and the company website.
Just gone.
The complex projects they built over years, the late nights they sacrificed away from their families, the institutional knowledge they generated, it is all systematically cleansed, anonymized, and transferred to the next user ID.
The digital trace of their human presence is completely sterilized.
But Scrylius highlights a massive, glaring double standard in who actually gets thrown down this modern memory hole. He calls them the pharaohs.
The founders, the CEOs, the members of the board.
Exactly. The pharaohs are completely exempted from this procedural erasure. When a CEO steps down, their email isn't just deleted.
No, it's often archived for legal and historical preservation.
Right. Their strategic decisions are immortalized in company histories, press releases, and Wikipedia pages. Their names are literally etched onto the sides of buildings or endowed upon university lecture halls.
The pharaohs get to build permanent monuments to their own existence, but the ordinary worker, the one actually cutting the stone and dragging the blocks, gets scrubbed from the record to comply with data protection.
It creates a profound disparity in historical legacy. And Scrylius grounds this in a deeply personal narrative about his father.
Yeah, his father was a career engineer who spent 30 years of his life working 50, sometimes 60-hour weeks.
Solving massively complex structural problems for global organizations, or organizations that will likely outlast him by a century.
And when his father passed away, Scrylius went looking for his professional legacy.
And what did he find?
Nothing. Absolutely zero searchable professional trace.
That is heartbreaking.
30 years of high-level intellectual labor, of missed family dinners and immense stress, and his entire life's work had simply vanished into the corporate ether. It was as if he had never set foot in those buildings.
That is devastating.
It really is. It's like spending your entire adult life painstakingly building a magnificent, towering digital sandcastle. You pour your blood, sweat, and tears into every grain of sand.
Yeah.
And the very second you clock out on your final day, the IT department acts as the tide, just washing the entire thing away in an instant, leaving the beach perfectly smooth as if you were never there.
Wow.
But we have to look at the psychological toll of this. What does it actually do to the human psyche? Waking up every single morning, commuting through traffic, knowing that your life's work is designed from the ground up to be disposable.
Well, the psychological literature on this points to a profound somatic depletion, what Scrylius terms a total loss of authorship.
Loss of authorship.
Yeah. Human beings have an innate evolutionary drive to create, to leave a mark on their environment, to establish a legacy. When you expend your finite biological energy on something you have absolutely no ownership of, something that will not bear your name and will be deleted the moment you cease to be profitable, it creates a deep cognitive dissonance.
Because the system proves to you, day after day, that it views you strictly as a rentable unit of labor.
Exactly. You aren't a builder. You are just a temporary battery powering their machine.
And that realization is the true engine of modern burnout, isn't it? We treat burnout like it's just a lack of sleep.
Oh, yeah. HR tells you to take a long weekend, do some yoga, download a meditation app.
Have a pizza party.
Right. But you can sleep for a week straight, and if you return to an environment characterized by authorless, meaningless work where your identity is systematically erased, your nervous system will remain entirely depleted.
You aren't tired. You are spiritually exhausted by your own disposability.
Precisely. Burnout is the soul's response to the memory hole.
Okay, so let's synthesize what we've mapped out so far. We're conditioned from childhood to crave external approval and fear authority.
Right.
We are blinded by corporate newspeak that prevents us from accurately naming our own exploitation. And we are doomed to the procedural memory hole that erases our legacy.
It is an incredibly robust, bleak architecture of control.
It is. So the inevitable question arises, if this system is so obviously extractive, why don't the workers just look around, recognize their shared reality, and organize?
Why don't they push back against the architects together? Because the architects anticipated that. The system has a built-in fail-safe to prevent collective realization. It ensures that the workers are far too busy fighting each other to ever look up and question the design of the maze.
Which brings us to the squid game of the modern office.
Yes, the systemic weaponization of internal competition.
Scrylius explains that the fundamental struggle in a corporate environment isn't actually between the worker and the corporation. The architecture is designed so that the struggle migrates inward.
It infiltrates peer groups, teams, and friendships.
Suddenly, a colleague's success is a direct threat to your own. Salaries become heavily guarded secrets that people awkwardly dance around in the break room. Your peers are no longer your allies. They are obstacles to your survival.
To illustrate this dynamic, Scrylius uses a very specific, visceral analogy from popular culture. The tug-of-war scene in the Korean survival drama Squid Game.
Oh, that is a perfect distillation of zero-sum corporate mechanics.
It really is.
So in the show, you have these characters who, up until this specific game, were allies. They shared limited food rations, they protected each other during riots, they learned about each other's families outside the game.
They established genuine human solidarity.
Right. But suddenly, the game masters place them on opposite ends of a thick rope, suspended high above a lethal chasm. The objective is brutally simple. Pull the other team off the edge to their deaths.
And what happens?
They pull. They pull with every ounce of strength they have, desperately trying to destroy the very people they were just comforting hours before. Not because they suddenly hate each other, but because the structural rules of the game demand it for their own survival.
And Scrylius argues that this exact dynamic is the invisible rope running through every open plan office. We don't drop colleagues into a literal chasm, obviously, but we use forced ranking performance reviews. We use key performance indicator dashboards.
The dreaded KPIs. Let's dig into that mechanism. How does something like a KPI dashboard or a performance review actually function like that glass bridge or the tug-of-war rope?
Well, look at the history of corporate management, specifically practices like Jack Welch's vitality curve at General Electric, often called stack ranking.
Correct.
Managers were literally forced to rank their employees on a bell curve. The top 20% were rewarded, the middle 70% were kept, and the bottom 10% were systematically fired every single year, regardless of absolute performance.
Wow. So even if you had a team of high performers, someone had to be the bottom 10%.
Yes.
So if I'm on that team, my survival literally requires someone else to fail. I can't just do my job well. I have to make sure my colleague does it worse.
Exactly. When a promotion cycle approaches, a colleague whose work you genuinely respect becomes, by mathematical necessity, a threat to your livelihood.
It is so toxic.
It is. From the inside, HR rebrands the structural combat as ambition or driving excellence or healthy competition. But the structure is the rope. You are pulling against your peers to survive the next round of layoffs or just to secure a raise that merely matches inflation.
Scrylius actually analyzes two specific corporate archetypes through the lens of these Squid Game characters to show how this environment warps human behavior. First, you have the successful monster, represented by the character Sang-woo.
Sang-woo is the epitome of the idealized corporate climber. He is highly intelligent, relentlessly rational, and utterly ruthless.
Right.
When the games begin, he immediately sheds his moral compass. He lies to his childhood friend, he manipulates the naive players, and he treats other human beings purely as disposable instruments for his own advancement. He eliminates the weak without hesitation.
And inside the arena, which maps perfectly to the hyper-competitive corporate hierarchy, those traits make Sang-woo a massive winner. He survives, he climbs the ladder, he gets the promotion to vice president.
But Scrylius makes a chilling observation here. Outside the game, in the real, functioning human world, those exact same traits make Sang-woo a clinical sociopath.
Wow. The corporation heavily rewards the exact psychological profile that would destroy a family or a community.
Yes. Conversely, you have the failure archetype represented by the main character, Gi-hun.
Right, and by conventional external metrics, Gi-hun is a total failure. He is messy, drowning in debt, and unemployed.
But inside the lethal logic of the game, Gi-hun is the only one who desperately tries to retain his humanity. He chooses to partner with the weakest player, an old man with a brain tumor, knowing it severely damages his own chances of survival.
He tries to establish cooperation when everyone else defaults to a violent every-man-for-himself mentality.
And what happens to Gi-hun? Because he refuses to compute correctly within the zero-sum logic of the system, the game nearly breaks him, mentally and physically.
The programming of the arena fails on him, And he suffers immensely for his empathy.
It perfectly illustrates the filtering mechanism of the architecture. The system elevates those who are willing to discard their humanity for metrics, and it punishes those who refuse to let go of their empathy, labeling them as not cut out for management or lacking the killer instinct.
But wait, I have to play devil's advocate again here.
Bring it on.
We keep talking about this as an artificial construct. But isn't competition just a raw, undeniable biological instinct?
Like survival of the fittest.
Right. We are primates. We've been competing for scarce resources, for territories, for mates, since the dawn of our species. Aren't these corporate structures like stack ranking simply reflecting basic human evolutionary nature, rather than artificially creating it?
It's a very common defense of the system, but evolutionary anthropology actually challenges that assumption entirely, and Scrylius addresses it.
Oh.
Yeah. While competition certainly exists in nature, for vast stretches of human history, hyper-cooperation was actually our primary evolutionary advantage. We survived predators and ice ages not by turning on each other, but by forming tight, collaborative tribal units.
Okay.
Think of agrarian societies just a few hundred years ago. Farmers survived by helping each other raise barns and harvest crops before the frost. They didn't survive by hiding their crop yields from their neighbors or sabotaging another farmer's plow.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
The hyper-competitive, withholding, zero-sum behavior incentivized in the modern office is not our baseline instinct. It is a behavior deliberately trained and reinforced by artificial scarcity.
And the purpose of that artificial scarcity is distraction. If I am utterly consumed with outperforming the guy in the cubicle next to me so I don't fall into the bottom 10% of the vitality curve, I am never going to have the mental bandwidth to look up and ask who designed the track we are running on.
Precisely. It keeps the workforce perpetually divided, suspicious of one another, and completely exhausted by the race they are already running. If workers view each other as existential threats, they will never organize, unionize, or even casually collaborate to question the fundamental architecture of control.
It is the ultimate divide-and-conquer strategy, executed immaculately via spreadsheets, KPIs, and performance metrics.
It really is.
So we have mapped the walls of the maze, we've looked at the childhood conditioning that makes us compliant, the newspeak that blinds us, the memory hole that erases us, and the weaponized competition that divides us.
It's a lot.
If we stop here, this is a profoundly depressing analysis. It feels totally insurmountable. But the core message of Tom Scrylius' work is not despair.
Not at all. It's actually fiercely optimistic, because his ultimate conclusion is that the door to this cage was never actually locked.
Which brings us to the most actionable and crucial phase of this deep dive, strategies for strategic rebellion. How do you actually escape an architecture this pervasive?
Well, the escape doesn't begin with a dramatic resignation letter. It begins internally. Scrylius argues that first, you must recognize the sheer physical and mental damage of what he calls the double shift.
Okay, the double shift. That is a vital concept to understand. It isn't about working two literal jobs, is it?
No. The first shift is the actual labor you perform, writing the code, analyzing the data, managing the client. But the second shift is the exhausting, invisible somatic labor of performing your corporate persona.
Oh man, the mask.
Yeah. It's the immense biological effort it takes to suppress your authentic reactions, swallow your natural dissent, and plaster on a compliant smile for 8 to 10 hours a day.
And this double shift takes a devastating physical toll. The body keeps the score. Scrylius describes watching his wife, who worked as a social worker, dealing with incredibly heavy, traumatic, emotional labor.
Yeah.
She would come home so physically wound up from performing the professional persona all day that she would have to lie on a hard rubber ball on the living room floor, sometimes for an hour, just to apply intense pressure to relieve the severe, chronic muscle knots in her neck and shoulders.
And Scrylius details his own physiological rebellion against the double shift, too.
Yeah.
He talks about the tightened physical knots in his stomach before simply opening an email from a manager.
Just from opening an email.
Yeah. He experienced blood pressure spikes that were so severe and inexplicable, they actually sent him to the emergency room.
Wow.
He correctly identifies that this isn't just standard workplace stress. This is your autonomic nervous system sounding an alarm. Your body is screaming that this made-up, hyper-compliant work personality is literally attacking the real you.
Your body recognizes the existential threat of the memory hole long before your conscious mind is willing to admit it.
Exactly.
So the very first step of rebellion is simply the art of noticing. You have to practice observing your own conditioned compliance reflexes in real time.
Just catching yourself in the act.
Yeah. Notice that utterly absurd moment when you are legitimately sick You have a fever, you are coughing, you are physically miserable, and yet you spend 20 solid minutes meticulously drafting, deleting, and rewriting a text message to your boss.
Oh, trying to sound sick enough, but not too sick.
Right. You agonize over the tone, trying to sound suitably apologetic, feeling profound, misplaced guilt just for being a biological organism with a failing immune system. Notice how you act as your own warden.
Once you become aware of how heavily you police yourself, you can start running experiments. You can start gently testing the bars of the cage.
Scrylius describes initiating a very quiet strategic rebellion. It wasn't a grand table-flipping Jerry Maguire exit. It was incredibly subtle.
Right, he just started stopping. He identified those optional performative meetings where his presence added zero value but was politically expected, and he simply stopped attending them.
He stopped volunteering for extra uncompensated projects designed to show hustle. He stopped checking or replying to emails after hours.
And most radically, he stood up and walked out of the office at exactly 5:00 p.m. every single day.
And we must highlight the consequence of this quiet rebellion. What actually happened when he stopped performing the double shift?
Absolutely nothing.
Nothing.
He wasn't fired. He wasn't hauled into HR for a reprimand. His performance reviews remained positive because he was still executing his actual job flawlessly. His salary kept hitting his bank account every 2 weeks.
He realized in real time that the electric shock he'd been fearing since the kindergarten fence wasn't real. The bars of the cage were largely an illusion, a projection maintained by his own conditioned anxiety.
That realization is the fulcrum of his philosophy. It shatters the learned helplessness, and it frees up the mental bandwidth and the time required for his ultimate strategy, the 1-hour sacrifice.
This is where we get into the actual mechanics of digital autonomy. True rebellion, according to Scrylius, is carving out exactly 1 hour every single day to build something that belongs entirely to you.
You sacrifice 1 hour of consumption, 1 hour of Netflix, 1 hour of video games, 1 hour of doom-scrolling social media, and you redirect that energy into building digital assets.
Let's define digital assets in this context because it's the absolute key to escaping the wage labor trap. A digital asset is anything that fundamentally decouples your income from your time.
Precisely. It could be writing and publishing an ebook, building an educational online course, coding a simple software tool, starting a YouTube channel, or even shooting and licensing stock footage.
The objective is to transition from linear income, where you trade 1 hour of your irreplaceable life for a fixed, heavily taxed dollar amount, to nonlinear income.
With a digital asset, you do the work once, and that asset can theoretically generate revenue for months or years while you sleep.
He frames this as the $1 challenge. The goal of the 1 hour sacrifice isn't to replace your 6-figure corporate salary on day one. That's an impossible expectation that just leads to failure.
Right, you'll just burn out again.
The goal is to make a single dollar independent of an employer, just $1. Because the psychological paradigm shift of proving to your own brain that you can generate value and capture capital without a boss's permission is monumental.
It breaks the conditioning of the gold star. You are no longer waiting for authority to validate your worth. You are generating it autonomously in the marketplace.
And alongside this offensive strategy of asset creation, Scrylius emphasizes a highly defensive financial strategy building an FU fund.
Oh, the FU fund is essential. It is your literal shield against corporate coercion.
It requires aggressive financial management. It means cutting out the status symbols that corporations use to keep you in debt. You don't need the lease on the luxury car. You don't need the newest iPhone every 12 months.
You live beneath your means until you have saved enough liquid capital to survive for 6 to 12 months without a paycheck. Because once you have that fund, the dynamic of the performance review completely flips.
Exactly. When you have an FU fund, you are no longer operating from a state of existential terror. The manager's threat of a layoff loses its sting.
That fund gives you the leverage to walk away from toxic environments, to say no to unreasonable demands, and to refuse the double shift entirely.
It's like finding a single loose thread on a heavily buckled straitjacket.
Yeah.
If you violently thrash against it, it holds you tighter. But if you just patiently, quietly pull that single thread for 1 hour a day, eventually the entire oppressive garment just unravels and falls away from you.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
But I have to ask the practical question here. Is this realistic for everyone? We aren't all software developers or charismatic content creators. Can the average person, exhausted from their 9 to 5, really build this one-man company Scrylius advocates for?
It's a vital question. The point Scrylius is making is not that every single person will become a millionaire tech founder or a viral YouTuber. That is a massive misinterpretation of the goal.
Okay, so what is the goal then?
The goal is to reclaim authorship over a portion of your identity, to have at least one domain in your life where you are the sole architect, the sole decision maker, and the sole beneficiary of your labor,
Even if it's small.
even if it's tiny. Furthermore, Scrylysis highlights a massive technological shift that makes this more accessible today than at any point in human history, the advent of artificial intelligence.
Oh, the AI component completely flips the script. In the corporate architecture, AI is currently being deployed as the ultimate overseer, right?
Oh, absolutely. It monitors employees' keystrokes, tracks the duration of their bathroom breaks, analyzes their tone in emails, and optimizes their output to the bone.
It is the ultimate tool of the architecture of control. But for the independent creator, for the person executing the one-hour sacrifice, AI acts as an unprecedented force multiplier. It becomes your co-pilot.
It democratizes technical capability entirely. If you have an idea for an asset but lack the technical skills, AI bridges the gap.
It automates the bureaucratic and technical burdens. It can edit your videos, format your code, synthesize your research, and write your marketing copy.
As Scrylis asserts, AI won't replace humans, but humans who use AI will rapidly replace those who do not. By utilizing AI as an infinitely patient, unpaid co-founder, an average person can scale their creativity without the crushing financial overhead of hiring staff or answering to a board of investors.
You stop trading your finite, rapidly depleting hours of life for a fixed salary that is constantly being eaten by inflation. You build leverage. And as Scrylius so powerfully states, leverage is the modern definition of freedom.
The corporate cage is entirely constructed upon a foundation of dependency. Digital autonomy is the systematic, brick-by-brick dismantling of that dependency.
Which brings us to the culmination of our deep dive today. We have explored the deep-seated childhood conditioning that trained us to equate compliance with survival.
We've unpacked the acoustic foam of corporate newspeak that neutralizes our dissent, and the cold reality of the memory hole that procedurally erases our legacy.
We've seen exactly how the architecture weaponizes internal competition via stack ranking to keep us exhausted and divided.
And how the double shift extracts our somatic energy until we are physically ill.
But the ultimate takeaway from Tom Scrylius and his frameworks is not one of cynical defeat. It is fiercely, radically optimistic.
Yes.
The cage isn't locked. It never was. You keep testing the bars, convinced they're electrified, only because an institution told you they were when you were 6 years old.
Your ultimate victory over this machine is not a loud, bloody revolution in the streets.
No. It is quietly, methodically building an identity, an asset, and an income stream that is completely independent of an organization that was designed from day one to forget you.
It is the ultimate act of reclaiming your time, your health, and your authorship.
As you go into work tomorrow, log onto your laptop or sit down in your cubicle, I want you to look around for a phenomenon Scrylius calls the Stephen effect.
This one is haunting.
It refers to a specific type of long-term worker. A Stephen is someone who has passed beyond the burnout, passed beyond the physical suffering, and has reached a state of total, permanent numbness.
A state of complete, glassy-eyed resignation to the system.
Look closely at the people in your office. Who around you is a Stephen?
It is a sobering and often terrifying observation to make in real life.
And more importantly, if you don't start pulling that loose thread today, if you don't start taking back your 1 hour a day right now to build something of your own, how long until you look in the mirror and realize Stephen is looking back at you?
A chilling thought to leave on.
It really is. Thank you for joining us on this custom deep dive, you guys. We encourage you to take that first small step towards your own digital autonomy today. Question the architecture, pull the thread, and we'll catch you next time.